Hello, Matthias. It's another week of single track. How are you doing?
Single track, episode 82. I took it away from you. We were just talking off mic what episode we're on, and I thought I'll throw this out there. I'm doing good. It's gross out. This is the weather report. But other than that, I'm doing good. We're live from the air, which is always an exciting time in the house of single track, and extra exciting because we have a very full house today.
We do. This is going to be one of those fun episodes that we that our listeners are going to have to decide of who is talking. So listen close to when people introduce themselves. Obviously, I'm Doug. Matthias is the one with the German accent, and then we actually have two special guests today who are kind of from my neck of the woods, a little further south, but a few. A few people from the famous for potato state, where I went to college. So if you two would like to introduce yourselves, and then we will get this going.
Well, I'm Jeremy Smith, and I'm the good-looking one. If that'll help you, that'll help you keep track of us later on.
Yes.
You and me both.
You've got a great face for radio, right? Is that the joke?
Well, thank you. I've been told that many times.
And I'm Jeff Fullmer, and I actually do count potatoes for a living, so that's kind of generic. But
I'm so glad that we got that very stereotypical joke in there. Okay, so we have got Jeff and Jeremy on the show. So, aside from your names, why are you on the show? You both are trail runners and race directors, and that's super exciting. Especially the race director part, because Doug and I, we organized our first trail race here in Olympia this summer, and my head is like spinning with trying to figure out how to take races, directing, organizing to the next level. So I will have millions of questions that I don't know if our listeners are going to be interested in that. But
your listeners, very specific.
Well, I can't speak for your listeners. They might be very interested, but the two listeners that I'm bringing to the show, I don't know if they're going to be interested in that.
The one listener that I have is always wondering about the sweat of the day. So that's this is very exciting because you guys are on to talk about a trail race down in one of the more beautiful parts of the country. I think it's an overrated or an underrated, overlooked area that as soon as Matthias sent me this link, I was like, oh, wow, there's a race that I'm going to have to do. Like, I love everything about this. So if you can, individually together, maybe at the same time, tell us about your race and, kind of the course and why you put it together.
Well, I'll jump in first. I know that, several years ago, friends and I were out trail running and always exploring new trails. And myself, I've been a runner since my early years of high school. And one of the first things I ever told my high school coach was, someday I'm going to run a 100-mile race. And that was, as I barely limped my way through 5Ks. She thought I was nuts, but I always had that goal. And several years ago, I did my first 100-miler and as a trail runner myself. And ever since, I thought, shoot, I'd love to direct a race of this magnitude. And to answer your question about our course, when we first got out there on these trails, we knew that this was, for us, probably the best place to do it, to the point where we started organizing a lot of group runs and just getting our friends out there on those trails and exploring deeper and deeper. And I don't know how in depth we'll go into some of our misadventures, but there's definitely been a lot of missteps and blood spilt on those trails before we even decided on the actual course to do. Wouldn't you agree, Jeff?
Oh, definitely. This is some wild backcountry. People that maybe live in the Boulder area or areas where the outdoors and outdoor access is prolific. This Palisades area is typically, a lot of the area is explored simply by hunters on horseback. And so it's some remote trails. There are one or two that are fairly well maintained, but for a majority, these are these are for elk hunting camps and used once or twice a year. And so it's some rugged area.
And the area that this and that your race series is taking place at is just southwest of Teton Pass in the Grand Teton National Park area. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, yeah, and that area is definitely, I think everybody, when they go out this way, their focus is always on the northern side of that, getting behind the Tetons, doing some of those things, not necessarily looking south once they're there, or they're going to the winds. But what was that first attraction to this area for you guys?
Doug, before you dive into this, for somebody who A, grew up in Germany, and B, lives far away from what you guys are talking about, go up a few more feet. Jeff and Jeremy, tell me, as somebody who has no idea what the Palisades area is, where the race is at. Give me a little bit more of a geographical anchor point so that I can track with what you insiders over there are talking about.
So if you look at the Tetons, which some of the most photographed mountains in the Rocky Mountains, in the Teton area, there's a lot of really big, rocky, craggy peaks, really high mountain passes. For the Palisades area, I would think, drop the elevation close to in half. I mean, our race is, from 5,000 to 8,000 feet or so. And so smooth out some of those rocky passes, and it's still rugged terrain, just a little bit lower in elevation, not quite as exposed, although we do have a few epic ridge lines to run over. Wildflower meadows. And if you're talking geographical on a map, just what are we, 20 minutes away from Alpine, Wyoming. Swan Valley, Idaho is the other direction, about 20 minutes. So we're just above the really big, beautiful Palisades Reservoir, which, it's just gorgeous area. I would say lowland Switzerland would come to mind. It's just, green meadows and some good mountain passes. You're always surrounded by peaks that are higher than you are running. We actually considered in our first year going up over one of those epic peaks, and we kind of decided against it because of the extreme nature of the rock hopping that would entail to get up over the top. But I don't know, Jeff, anything to add to the description of the course?
Nope. It's just it's on the very southern end of the greater Yellowstone region. And so Yellowstone National Park and the whole region it encompasses, it's just right on that southern end. And so yeah, it is definitely kind of a drive-through area. People trying to get to Yellowstone, trying to get to Jackson or Grand Teton National Park, or going the other way to Idaho Falls and further south.
That sounds fantastic. So you guys live over there, or how did you find this place?
Well, I personally I live in Idaho Falls, and so it's less than an hour drive to get to Palisades. And I've been going up there on these trails for well over a decade. Part of it's not on our course, but right next to the course is one of the most popular trails in all of Southeast Idaho. And because of that, we didn't want to put our race on those heavily congested trails, but they're used year round. Enough people are on them that you're able to go up at least to the lower Palisades Lake. But
that sounds fantastic.
And so you mentioned you teased this right off the top. As you were exploring this area, you said there's a gnarly mountain that you decided not to do, and these trails are basically hunting trails, aside from a few of the main corridors. What was it that attracted you to this area to even start to want to put a race together?
We like putting ourselves in really awkward situations, potentially life-threatening. Like Jeff mentioned, going up the Palisades Lake Trail with scout groups and our families and whatnot over the past several years. It just left us wanting more, and you can kind of see a glimpse. It's almost like a half-opened curtain where you get to see just the front part of that natural room, and then once you go through that curtain, then it just opens up this brilliant, I would say, amphitheater of just sights and sounds and colors and the animals and just everything up there. So, why did we put the race there? Well, when I was living in Idaho Falls at the time too, where we lived, there's a 5K every weekend and sometimes 3 to 4. There was one trail race that popped up probably, I want to say 6 years ago, maybe, that was in the general area over near Kelly ski area. And there just wasn't a lot. And yet all the trails are just there kind of begging runners to run them. And that Palisades Lake Trail that was about a 4-mile each way, we started venturing past it up through a place called Waterfall Canyon, and then we'd get to Waterfall Canyon and we'd say, oh, what's this Sheep Creek Trail that has a rundown sign at the top of it. And then we'd get up to Mount Baird, which was the mountain I was talking about, which is the highest point in the county, and we'd climb that. And then since we are adventurous types, we would start doing it in the wintertime, and we led group runs up to these places, and then we do it in the springtime. In fact, some of our friends are not as tall as I am, not that anyone would know, but I'm 6'3", and some of our buddies that were 5'6" would cross these creeks in the springtime and nearly get swept downstream, and we'd get lost up there. And this is where we learned how to use Garmin InReach device, and this is where we learned how to be sure to tell all of our spouses and our families where we were at when we were up in the mountains, because some trips that would have taken 5 hours ended up taking past nightfall. We'd get back and families would be worried sometimes. But for us, it's just that draw for me, it's that draw of adventure of, you don't know what to expect. I mean, we've run into full-grown, full-bore moose on the trail. We've heard grizzlies. We've definitely kicked copious amounts of grizzly feces off the trails, as a courtesy for other runners that came after. It's that adventure. It's that mystery. It's the 80 creek crossings. When you get up there, and that's where I learned that it's okay to go running and get your feet wet. Because these horse trails, no one cares if your horse's feet gets wet. That's why there's not bridges over most of the course. So runners don't go there, but we feel like when we were up there, we wanted to showcase that and give people an opportunity to do a trail that there's no way sane, intelligent, I don't know, people that care about themselves more than their safety, they're not going to go up there by themselves on the weekend unless we provided that opportunity. So I know for me, that was one of the draws for doing it over there.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I think that's one of the incredible things about trail running and especially racing, that you can go and visit another place and trust the locals who've scouted the trails and marked a course, and sort of get to adventure in a reasonable, safe environment, right? I mean, you don't just have aid stations, but you also have the flagging and course marking provided that a race lays out, and thus giving you the opportunity of going out into a place that you otherwise wouldn't. I mean, you could definitely go out, but it would require so much more in preparing for the area that you're going in. Let's talk a little bit more about the wildness. since they're 100 milers and other races, this week is the North Face 50 miler in San Francisco, which is a race which is anything but wild in a sense in comparison. But do you have, from a practical point of view, do you have mandatory gear, and how do you prepare your runners who find a 100 miler on Ultra Sign Up? How do you get them to understand the environment that they are going to be navigating, especially if they travel from outside the area?
Well, I think one of the best things that we do is Jeff. Jeff's our tech whiz, and Jeff has crafted an amazing website and a series of videos that basically are kind of online pre-race videos that describe the course itself. And so, Jeff, I don't know if you want to tell us about some of those things that you've done, because they're pretty groundbreaking. I think all trail racers should do them.
Well, getting back in there in that backcountry, the challenge we have is we've only got about 2 months, maybe 3 months that we can be up in that country. Because of the conditions. I attempted to go out the end of September. And, when you have to cross, when it's close to freezing and you cross a creek and it's 5 a.m, and then you start climbing a steep hill, and then all of a sudden it's snowing and you're in slush and you're on some extremely steep terrain. Like, there's not a lot of room for error in getting lost. And so that's where the technical aspects of, and I think that's how we got connected, was through Steven with Topo Maps Plus. I scoured maps, because we would go out to these areas. We would look at the Forest Service maps, and we would constantly be standing there saying, where's the trail at? And so we found with helps through like Topo Maps Plus and other GPS devices that we were able to go out there and accurately locate the trails and figure out what was usable and what was not. So a lot of trial and error, and getting out there, getting deep enough into there to figure out where stuff's at, and then by that time the day's gone, and trying to cram all that in. So it's been a multi-year process to pull this together. And so I've taken a lot of that knowledge and a lot of that technical information and put it into maps pages. We use CalTopo maps, typically between that and Topo Maps Plus is what we use on the ground, and then CalTopo is what we use to, when we take it back in to the computer after running and put it all together. But it's all up on our website. I actually went through a walkthrough, an overview, did a screen recording video last year for our 100 milers to show them, walk them through. We had some on ground videos of key turns. But it's a unforgiving area that you go down a wrong canyon and you're either going down or you're going up. Yeah. So you make a wrong turn and you go down. It can be extremely frustrating and challenging. So, but as far as required gear, it depends on the race distance. For the 100 milers, they definitely need to have a running pack and a headlamp. We encourage bear spray. We encourage small portable water filters. Sawyer makes a great one for $20. You can run down to Walmart and grab it. And then all the other standard essentials that they may think they need. But the aid stations are all close enough that if they've got at least 2 liters of water on them, then for the most part they should be good. But it all varies on the runner and varies on their the time that they're moving, time on their feet.
Awesome. Give us a couple more vitals for the race. So what's the total vertical gain and loss for the 100 miler?
So the 100 miler is about 22,000 feet of gain and loss. Okay. And it goes up closer to 9,500 feet. But it's, like we said, you're kind of always going up or you're going down, with a couple intense climbs. But a fair amount of the climbs are spread out.
Mm-hmm.
There's no on your hands and knees type of stuff.
What's the average spacing between aid station, or perhaps what's the longest between aid stations?
So the longest is on Paradise Loop, and it is about 9.5 miles.
Okay.
And that one's a challenging one. But probably the most challenging one, it's only 8 miles, but it's because of the climb and the time in the race. And it's the last big stretch before doing a little out and back and heading back to the finish. But yeah, there's multiple ones that are within 4 to 5 miles, and then there's a couple that are 9.5 to 8 on the 100.
And is it a gigantic loop? Is it out and back? Describe a little bit the course.
So, and here's the amazing thing with this race. We didn't want to. Our concept was we don't want to do something that was start in a parking lot and everyone show up that morning. And we wanted this to be an event, an experience that families could come and enjoy what we have to offer, and to play host to that. And so as part of that, we've partnered with our local YMCA. They have a youth camp, outdoor camp, with cabins and power and water. I mean, we're in an area where you can hardly even get cell service. Mm-hmm. But so we have an actual outdoor YMCA camp where the start finish is at. So there's tons of camping and an exclusive area. And so from there, everything starts and finishes there. And so the 100-miler is 2 loops. And then the 50-miler is 1 loop, and the is 1 loop, and then the half marathon is an out back.
Mm-hmm. So when we say that there's loops, it's more of a figure 8 loop. So that 50-miler and the 100-miler, they'll do the whole figure 8, and then the 50K, that will just do one part of the figure 8.
Right.
To give a mental image of that.
Yeah. That sounds amazing. I mean, I'm super partial to the whole event finish line experience, especially if you're in a rugged wilderness. It just feels really great to be able to come to a finish line and not have to drive an hour and a half immediately back, that you have a cabin there or can stay or be able to camp and running water and stuff. That sounds amazing.
Well, that's probably one of my favorite parts is Sunday morning, waking up and seeing a few 100-milers limp out of a cabin or their tent and just kind of, I'm glad I got to sleep last night. It's kind of, it's a fun scene the next morning.
So, I mean, having that there and the time of the year that it is in July, this looks, from knowing the region, this looks like it's an absolutely beautiful time. The snow is going to be melting. It's going to be really green everywhere. There's going to be wildflowers. Like, is the scenic beauty found on this trail enticing enough to get somebody who is comfortable with 50-milers to go out and do a 100-miler?
Well, it comes down to that 100-miler mindset. Mm-hmm. When we first originally set things up, I wanted, after exploring all these different trails, wanted to showcase everything we could. But with a 100-miler, I mean, half the race, or at least 8 hours of it, is in the dark.
Yep.
You aren't going to see anything. And so that's the beauty of the 100-mile course is, that second loop, especially it being in the opposite direction.
Oh, cool.
There's a lot of stuff that, I mean, I'll go out on those trails, you do an out and back and it looks completely different, both directions. Mm-hmm. But then to do night and day. And so there's a lot of different experiences that, yes, it's the same trail on the second loop, but we've designed it so that the 100-milers cutoff is the start time for the 50-miler. And so that second half of the 100-miler through the night, they've got 50-milers now on the course with them. and so it creates some different dynamics. Hopefully it helped us last year. A few get through the night.
Yeah. We've often talked about how on any trail race, no matter how many people are there, no matter what the distance, all of a sudden, most runners are going to find themselves alone. And I think to have that at the 50-mile mark, that's got to be a psychological boost. That's brilliant to kind of have that there, just being like, okay, now you're not quite as alone. You're still alone, but you still have, you can at least like see more headlamps and things like that at some point. So,
well, that was part of our vision was to try to calculate, everyone finishing at the same time. We thought it was a cool idea to get 50K runners potentially finishing around the same time as some 100-milers. I mean, can you imagine, you're running a 50K and all of a sudden, or no, you're running a 100-miler and all of a sudden some 50K guy catches up to you and, it's like, oh, wow. And then they say, oh, I didn't know there was someone ahead of me. Well, I've been running for 18 more hours than you. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's, I think our calculations have worked out decently where there's a lot of people crossing each other. Obviously if the cutoff for the 50 miles or the 100-milers is the halfway point, and most of the 100-milers have already begun their second 50-mile loop or their out and back section once the 50-milers start. But to have those 50-milers catching some of those people, I mean, it's got to be motivating for the 50-milers. And like you said, I've been alone in the middle of the night, on runs and stuff. And it's cool to have someone, alongside you. You make new friends, and there's not a lot of friends to be had in those mountains. We're definitely the only ones up there that weekend. There's not a ton going on.
Well, oh, go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was going to say, so we calculated things. So someone who may be hesitant with a 100-miler, we thought, how cool would it be to have a 50-miler where you have several hours that you're running in the dark. And so with that first loop cutoff for the 100-miler, the 50-miler starts at 2 a.m.
Wow.
So there's a solid 3 hours of pitch black to give a unique experience for someone that's maybe afraid to run through the night.
Mm-hmm.
You're basically going to be up all night anyways, because I didn't know very many of those 50-milers that were able to sleep from 10 till 1. That it just didn't happen. So a good sleep deprivation race experience for someone who is hesitant to jump up to that 100-miler. And that 50-miler's pretty stout. It's half the elevation of the 100-miler, and they get to cover the whole course. And then they just don't do it in the reverse direction. So.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, it sounds so fun. I mean, the 2 a.m. start sounds bonkers to me, but at the same time,
it was a somber start. I walked out there and everyone's just pelled and blank stares. There's no cheering. No, it was quite funny. So.
Well, and I mean, I think you guys are spot on. Like, how much sleep do you really get before a long race anyway? So, and so why not have that nighttime start? And I think we can all agree that, like, there's nothing quite like being able to catch a sunrise or sunset on a trail. And if you could do both, like, that's fantastic. So,
Yep. And on sweeping the course, I was able to get into what we call Paradise Loop. It's the longest section, and that's a section where people do find themselves alone quite frequently because it's almost 10 miles. But I was back in the high point of the course and caught it at sunrise as we were, sweeping flags the following Monday, and just incredible. And didn't see a person. It was a Monday. Didn't see another soul that whole day. We saw a couple roaming horses, and that was it. So
amazing. You certainly sold the race well. I think it's always fascinating to sort of. I mean, for me as a business owner who loves the idea of sort of creating. I don't want to call it a product because a race is so much more than a product, but sort of taking a dream and turning it into reality and figuring out all of the the little challenges and what it takes to make it work, not just for yourself as an organizer, because if you wanted it to be easy, you wouldn't be organizing those events, right? Those are incredible hard work. But to create an experience that people get to enjoy, and for me, that's where I'm going with my next question. Is like, tell me a little bit about what's the most rewarding thing. What are some moments where you feel like this is why we did this? This is why we came out here for.
You know, I'm gonna answer that. For me personally, with a quick story about myself, I signed up for my first 100-miler. And when I did that, I actually expected to fail. I mean, I'm 6'3", I weigh 230 pounds. I'm fast for my weight, but I mean, that's a long time for a big dude to be out there. And Jeff actually helped pace me through that experience. But I expected to fail. And I didn't want to, but I just was trying to explore and find my limits. And I know for me this past year, one of my most rewarding moments, I hope I don't steal Jeff's story because I know he likes it too, was when we were driving to the drive-up aid stations and just checking on our 100-milers through the night. You know, they'd been running for 16, 18 hours. And there was one father in particular, like we said, it's a family event. He had turned around at the halfway point and continued off into the night, going back the way he had just come in, and said, you know, goodbye to his family. And
let me just cut in there real quick.
Yeah.
That section he went back up, you climb a couple thousand feet in a mile.
Nice.
So he knew what he was going up. He had just come back down this. He knew what he was going to have to go up. It's just straight up, and it's not a you know, there's no switchbacks. So he knew, and it's a long stretch. There's some boulder fields, like not an easy section. One of the toughest section of the course. So all right.
And it's perfect frame. So about 5 hours later, I want to say I went back to the other aid station, which would have been his next aid station. And the aid station workers, you know, must have been, 3 in the morning, something along those lines. I think it was after the start of the 50-miler. And the aid station captain told me they had 100-miler that was sleeping. And I went over and started talking to him, and he said, "Oh, I'm done." And so I actually put him in my truck, and we drove him back to the finish. And as we were going, he said, you know, I knew I was done when I headed back, but I didn't want to quit right in front of my boys and my wife. And just, I wanted them to see that I kept going. And it's experiences like that. I see that. And we have a high DNF rate, like higher than most races. It's not, you know, something that we are deliberately trying to sabotage runners, but this is tough. We never advertise an easy race. We know that it's tough. And that's one of the questions we get all the time from prospective runners is, okay, I see your times. I see the DNF rate. Why is this so hard? And for us, I don't make apologies about that. You know, I love the stories of Laz and the Barkley, you know, marathons that are really popular now. You know, we don't make apologies for something that's difficult, because eventually the human spirit will overcome. And if in that process you find there are some failures and some bumps along the way, that just makes it all the more worth it, in my opinion. I'm not disappointed that I didn't finish my own 100-miler, because I was able to finish, and I was very proud of that. But I'm still seeking to explore my limits, and I hope we can give that opportunity to people. I know for me, the long answer to your question is, you know, that to me is so rewarding, is seeing people find their limits, and seeing those that find their limit and then are able to keep going to actually finish, is just that celebration of the human spirit is what it's all about for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that story. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and this year was a unique year with the weather in the Rocky Mountains. Hard Rock, of course, was canceled, and we had 3 or 4 runners that were looking for a race that same weekend, because it's the same weekend as Hard Rock.
Oh, okay.
And they'd done the training. They were ready. They were getting deferred, you know, to the following year. So they're just, they didn't want to waste it. We had one gentleman that came in, and he was on our 100-miler that was signed up for Hard Rock, and he got done, and he was so thrilled. His expectations and what he actually experienced was far and above, what he was planning on. And so it's responses like that, and just that gratitude and that humility of, I mean, anyone who's running a 100-miler, every 100-miler that I've met, especially in races, we help out a lot of aid stations, not only putting on races, but helping out other race directors. And so we see a lot of that. And, but to be a part of that and actually organizing an entire event around that and what we have to be the most beautiful area in our region, in my opinion, is extremely rewarding. And the other side benefit is we're helping to support the YMCA, our local YMCA, and helping to get kids into the outdoors that normally wouldn't be getting into the outdoors, and then helping to get these trails opened up and get them actually on a correct map, so that hikers and runners and everybody can go out and enjoy them, because we put in 2-3 years ago, we probably put in 300 to 400 hours of trail work. Our race board did. And then we've organized stuff this last year. We were a couple hundred hours easy in trail work. And then our local Forest Service this year really stepped up to help clear trails, the bigger stuff. But because of the area that it is, the overgrowth is extensive. You can cut stuff back, and 2 weeks later, it's there again. So
it's there again.
Yep, it's a lot of work, but the reward at the end of the day was pretty hard to compare it. And it's something our families are involved with. Our families are helping, and they're helping with the timing, or they're helping. I'm able to go out with my boy and mark trails, or go pick up markers with them and get them into these places that I love, that I have an excuse now to take them into, because we've got a task, but we get to go enjoy the trails. So,
Well, that's what it seems. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what Matthias and I have always found about trail running, is it's a way to explore and to open up these areas that we absolutely love to more people. There's nothing quite like pushing somebody a little bit to get them to an area that you find to be your soul nourishing location, especially when it's out in your backyard. That's even better. Speaking to that, what are you guys' best moments back in the Palisades? Like what's a moment that stands out as like, this is it. This is the height of what I've experienced so far.
Maybe one of my most poignant moments was after the first year of the race, where, you guys are race directors, you understand what goes into, an event. There were, no matter how many plan A, B, C's we had, there were some things that just didn't go right. And after that first year, the night after the race, so race gets over, Saturday night, and we're all exhausted because we were all up Friday night hoping that runners weren't dying out in the wilderness. But that Sunday, we're cleaning up camp, and we realized there were some pretty expensive medical bags still left out on the trails, and we're all exhausted, and a few sweepers I think hadn't quite done what they were supposed to do, and some horse teams had failed us in what they were going to do, and so we said, well, we're gonna go up here and we're gonna do this tonight. And myself and a couple of our crewmates, including one of the YMCA employees, went up over the saddle beneath Mount Baird on where the trail was that year, and we did this long just slog. I mean, we were zombies. And by the end, all said and done, we walked out with 50, 60 pounds each of gear on our shoulders, on our necks, on our in our hands, just hauling out gear, trying to leave no trace. We didn't want bears to come and attack a camp and rip open a trash bag or something like that. And so we wanted to get it taken care of right away. And so we got up there and did that. And just the sheer exhaustion and the sheer, it's tough. I mean, that's tough to be up on those trails, when you're fresh without a big pack on. And we have a board member named Spencer who, he's a workhorse. He's not very big, but he was just loading so much. And I just saw him almost crumbling under the weight of some of this stuff we were carrying out. And it was just a very poignant moment where, it's all night, it's nature. You're exhausted. That to me was a pretty poignant moment. And also reflecting on, the fact that everyone had survived the year and that we managed to pull it off. And, was it perfect? No, but it was a huge relief. And I don't know, it was just a very cathartic experience. And I think we experienced it in some degree this last year too, where, we've made a commitment to the Forest Service and to all participants that we go out there on those trails the day after the race to double check and make sure that everything is left in great condition. And those are the moments to me that immediately following the race that just get a chance to reflect and breathe, have a nice, just go back and do what we love. And that's just being out there,
So this 2020 is going to be the third year for you guys. Am I correct?
Yep. That's right.
Yes.
Tell our listeners where they can learn a little bit more about your race and how they can sign up.
Yep. PalisadesUltra.com. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, but the PalisadesUltra.com, there's the 4 different races we offer. And we also we just do a free Critter Kids 1 mile run. We let the kids run, and we typically give them awards from the previous year and something that families really look forward to. But that's just a little free thing, so that's not on there. But we have the 4 races, so whatever you're interested in, click on one of those races, and it'll give you all the detail, and then the actual sign-ups on Ultra Sign Up. But there's a link on our website.
Awesome. Let's take a brief moment and thank our amazing sponsor. I went on a super cool run with a few of my running buddies. We did what most runners do on the weekend, right? We found a cool route, got a couple people together, and ran some trails, right? What route, you're asking? Well, you got to check Strava for that. And why did we pick that route? Yeah, there's a story too, but for now, we'll keep that secret. Anyway, when running in a group, you don't just go all out running at top speed, not being able to chat, right? You sort of slow down, you share stories, you stop and look around and check and see what's going on. Well, one of the conversations went from talking about the economy in general to growth opportunities and investment possibilities, and very quickly resulted in talking about commercial loans. Yes, my banker, Scott Mickey, superstar loan officer lender at Heritage Bank, was part of the run. And he didn't force that conversation. That wasn't a run to be a selling opportunity. It came up naturally. No business cards were exchanged, no appointments made, but relationships were built. And who knows, next time somebody needs a loan, people might remember Scott and give him a call. And I think that's what Heritage Bank is all about. I've told you in the past how the focus is helping the community succeed. Our community, your community. Our community is full of outdoor lovers, trail runners with bad musical tastes, and Heritage is part of that community. They're not dusty corporate suits, but regular everyday folks with perhaps a questionable taste in music, but a heart for their community and a mission to help you succeed with whatever plan you have for your life. Visit heritagebanknw.com. That's heritagebanknw.com for information on where you can find the nearest location. Stop in and, well, tell them Fire and Ice is your favorite song. That's the magic word. Heritage Bank, thanks for sponsoring Single Track. Now back to Jeremy and Jeff from the Palisades Ultra Trail Series. So let's talk a little bit about you as runners and not just as race directors. We've obviously hinted at this a little bit, but you both are accomplished ultra runners yourself. Who wants to go first and tell a little bit about some of the journey that you've made to get into ultra running, and then some of your highlights, and we can break this up into multiple sections.
All right, Jeff, you're the runner. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So, I, it was interesting. When I was about 4 years old, I was walking with a limp, and my dad, being the farmer and, that type of mindset of, well, if something's off, we need to measure it and figure it out. So he put me on a table and measured that one leg was shorter than the other. And so at the age of 4, they took me in to get me x-rayed or to figure out what was going on. And they found out that one of my hip sockets was deteriorating. And so it was actually shortening up my leg. And I was diagnosed with Legg-Perthes disease, which is the deterioration of the hip socket. And back in the mid-'80s, they had what's called a Scottish Rite's brace. And a deal around the waist, kind of a Forrest Gump, but even more awkward, is it came down to the knees and there was a 14-inch bar in between. So I had that in one hip for a couple of years, and then it showed up in the other hip, and I had it on till I was 9. And I don't know if that's what's driven me to push myself after being restrained for that long. But the mountains have always been my solace. It was 5 years ago that I heard about a race that was actually on trails, and I was blown away. I had done the St. George Marathon in 2010, and I had kind of fallen out of love of running. I wasn't running much, and 2015 hit, and I heard about this race, and I'm like, are you kidding me? They're running on trails? I'm like, I do that. When I go hiking, when I'm out there, when I'm going uphill, I'm hiking. When I'm going downhill, I start jogging. That's the best way to get back.
Exactly.
I'm like, that's a sport? Are you kidding me? and I'm like, I'm already a pro. But having grown up near Idaho's High Point, right at the base, right at the feet of the Lost River Range in Mackay, Idaho, I missed all that. We didn't go anywhere unless you could go there on a horse or a 4-wheeler or a truck. And that's just how it was growing up. And so as an adult, I've been discovering this love for the outdoors and trail running. And 2015, found about a race, and I told our local running shop, I didn't know about this. The race is next week. You guys need a Facebook group or something. They said, well, why don't you start one? So I did, and started up Dowdle Falls Trail Runners, because it's not an obvious, we've got trails right outside our door. You really have to know where trails are at. There's some obvious ones, but there's so many areas to go, but it's not on maps, or the maps are poor. So I got into running and ran the Spitfire race. One of our board members, Jen Saunders, is the RD for that race, and it's actually on an inactive volcano. And anyways, that was my first trail run. Loved it. Started organizing. That's how I met Jeremy. Was our first group official IFTR group run. And from then on, he was training and doing all these shenanigans. And he said, hey, let's do a race or a fun run up in Palisades in the winter up to a mountain lake in February and stuff like that. And everything started snowballing, literally. And then I just started increasing the distances, and a regional one, River of No Return, up in Chalice, Idaho. Mm-hmm. That was my first 50K. And then I've done, I think the longest distance I've done was a 40 miler, but I've actually worked more aid stations and crewed and paced more than I've actually raced. There seems to be just as much joy in that. Definitely a lot less pain, but But just being part of the experience, whether it's race directing, whether it's actually being out on the trails or getting things ready, it's just having a purpose to be out there is just inspiring, and it's inspiring to see what others are doing and what others are attempting, and it's just it overflows into every aspect of your life.
Yeah. I love how similar the stories for us as runners are, and yet how unique each story is, right? I think we all find a way of sort of dipping the toe in the water and sort of getting to introduced to a sport and then falling in love with it and sort of realizing how the sport changes us and makes us a better person. And that's what makes us keep coming back, even though it's inherently something where it's inconvenient, it's dirty, it's sweaty.
It's a bit of a masochistic relationship.
Exactly, really. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that was one of you start into running. How about the other?
Well, as far as Jeremy's concerned, I was not walking with a limp when I was 4, and I didn't like running really at all. I was kind of a multi-sport athlete, the typical soccer, basketball, thing. I had a pretty big build, and I missed soccer tryouts before my freshman year of high school. And so this true story, this really, in my memory, this very cute girl sat in the hallway at school handing out flyers for this sport called cross country. I didn't know what that meant, but I said, heck yes, I'll do whatever you want me to do.
And, that's a perfect Hallmark moment.
That's all it takes for a 14-year-old boy to take up a new sport.
For sure.
But, I was fortunate that when I joined as a freshman, I had an incredible coach, very experienced, very passionate, who I still communicate with to this day. And, that year I was last on the team and just found a love for it. I actually quit playing basketball and soccer and focused exclusively on running for the rest of high school. And after I graduated, kind of lost my way in college, didn't really keep up on my running quite as much. Didn't run in college. I went to a competitive Division I school, and when I asked the coach if I could walk on, he asked me if I was a javelin thrower or a discus thrower for my build. I mean, as I mentioned, I was well over 200 pounds, and I said, no, I'm a mile runner. And he's asked me my personal best time, and I told him, and he was pretty impressed, but I wasn't anywhere near a Division I runner time. So he politely declined to let me walk on the team. But after college, I moved to Idaho Falls. And this, maybe 15 years ago, before I met Jeff, I got back into running, and I went to a personal trainer at a local gym there, and she told me I was too fat to run a marathon. And that kind of inspired me, lit a fire under me a little bit. And so after my first marathon, I qualified for Boston, and I slapped the results down on her desk and walked the other way. And
fantastic.
Jeff Fullmer and I had a mutual friend that worked at the local running store named Marlon. And he, after I ran the Boston Marathon with him, he told me, he's like, you love the outdoors, you love running, and you're pretty quick. Why don't you try trail running? And it just seemed like a perfect fit. And so I kind of I'm a running coach by trade now. So I coach high schoolers, and I'm a private running coach. And so I laid myself a training program down and started running 50Ks, and then progressed to 100K and then 100 miler. And that was probably 3 years ago. And as I tried to push the envelope, maybe a little too much, I actually, at this last year, have struggled with some lower leg injuries. So I get to have surgery on my Achilles this winter. So I'll be kind of out for this winter, but hoping to be gradually getting back into competitive running by next summer, or at least getting myself in some kind of shape so that I can become a competitive runner again. But as Jeff said, and as you guys have commented, it's one of the things that grounds me and keeps me sane, helps me make sense of life, and helps me, stay a well-rounded person. And I definitely notice, like now being injured, I notice what it's like to not have it in my life. It's definitely a part of who I am, who I've always been, and who I always will be. Whether I'm coaching it or race directing or, racing myself, it's something that it's always going to be a part of my life in some way. So that's my relationship with running.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. I mean, obviously the four of us, but I think a lot of our listeners too, is I had held off on running for a long time. I ran all junior high and high school and a little in college, and then just got burnt out. Right. And I was like, I don't enjoy this. And then I was missing that thing. And Matthias is the one that got me back out into running. And we went down to the Grand Canyon and ran rim to rim to rim. And it was just kind of like, okay, this is something that actually helps. And it's amazing that mental clarity and kind of the calmness you get in life from running, and to hear you guys speak to it too, and to just know that this is a part of the community where we have this outlet in the outdoors where we can reset. There's an actual reset button on our brains out there that we can come back and look at everything completely different. And it's inspiring to hear you guys talk about that. I thank you very much for sharing that, because I know it's not always the easiest thing to talk about, the running history and kind of the ups and downs of it. So it's great. I do have one I have many running related questions, but I have another running related question that I'm curious about. Outside of your home area, is there a run that you've done that you think is great, or that you want to go back and do, or that's made you very happy, like a race experience, just a trail you happen to run for fun, anything like that, but just not in your home area, just elsewhere in the West or in the world?
Well, for me, when I was training for my 100, one of the things I did that summer, or the summer before perhaps, was we went up to Banff Canada. And I think it's a national park, but we went up there, and I needed to get in some long runs, and the trails up in Banff are just absolutely breathtaking. But there's one problem with those trails. There's a lot of grizzly bears. Mm-hmm. And to the point where if you've never been in the places that we were camping, there were electrified fences and electric cattle guards and road gates everything was electrified because they did not want a bear coming through and getting into your camp. That's the extent of the bears there. They didn't want you in on most of the trails in groups of less than 4 to 6 people, and everyone needs bear spray, and you have to, everyone has bear bells and talking loud. And so for me, this one day I had to do my long run, which for that week was supposed to be about 22 miles. And so I went out on this really nice trail that my wife and I were not going to be able to hike in one day. And she was expected me back in 3 hours. Well, I went on this trail that ended up being a lot longer and more rugged than I was ready for. It ended up being about 5 hours, but probably one of the most beautiful trails through, iceberg lakes and mountain passes and just gorgeous scenery, really rugged and rocky, and, through these dense pine forests where I was clutching my bear spray with the safety off and inventing songs and singing them as loud as I could, because I knew there was a pack of grizzly bears around the corner. But anyway, that was one of my favorite runs until I got back to the parking lot to find my wife teary and thinking that I had made her a widow because she thought I'd get eaten by a bear. She was about to call the Forest Service. And so I made it back just in time. But and on a side note, that was the trip that she decided I needed a Garmin InReach to keep in touch with her better on these long adventures. But yeah, running in Banff, to me, probably a spot that I would definitely go trail running again.
Nice.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
look, the Garmin InReach dot is still moving. I hope it wasn't a grizzly who accidentally swallowed it and is now lumbering along the trail.
I'm pretty sure that's the theme to Jurassic Park 2.
Oh, there we go. That's right.
So, I completely understand the running in grizzly country and just like you have your bear spray out and you're like, I hope I don't trip and accidentally discharge this, but I'm ready for a bear. And so in Yellowstone, they say to hike in groups of 3 or more people. And so what I do sometimes is just talk in 4 different voices to myself loudly because, just in case they know that there's a different, like, they'll be like, oh, those are 4 different voices, even though it's only one smell, and that's how they judge things. But
yeah, that seems to work really well. That's hilarious.
and so that was yours. How much? I just forgot who was talking. I'm sorry.
Jeff.
So,
So we have one more best running story.
Well, as far as areas that I've ran in, we went down Bryce Canyon and went there for a little family vacation. And of course, you're on family vacation, so you wanna get out pretty early. So I didn't interrupt too much of the family time. So I went out in Bryce Canyon, and it was amazing. I used a Trail Run Project app. We hadn't even been into the park yet. We left our hotel or I did, in the dark, and drove to a spot. The gates were locked, so I had to kind of figure out how to get into the park. I had a route all set up anyways, ran into the park, but I was there in the heart of Bryce Canyon at sunrise, and just a spectacular morning. One of those runs that had never seen anything like that, with the rock formations, and the beauty of it was just incredible. And that's my biggest problem is when I'm in an area for the first time, I probably take more pictures than I do run. And so that's a problem when you're trying to knock out 20 miles, but Bryce Canyon was definitely one of my highlights for, just because of the contrast of, that region compared to where we live.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I think there's a huge push for most of us in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem to kind of go down to that Utah Red Rock area and just get away and be like, oh right, there's no trees, there's no real super tall mountains. It's just kind of a completely different world and universe. And that's I still have yet to run in Bryce Canyon, but I've only heard good things. So I saw that there's a race down there, but it's a different group that puts on those races, so I'm not sure how that goes. So.
Well, very cool. So you had mentioned off mic that you have something special for our listeners. So I want you to, fill them in.
Yes. So we have, actually, while we're talking, I just threw it up on Ultra Sign Up, a coupon code for just your listeners.
Amazing people.
Yes. So we've already got the lowest prices for our race are already in place right now. So this is by far the steepest discount you'll get. Prices go up in December, at the end of December. But we have a coupon code to enter in on Ultra Sign Up when you check out, and it is single track putts. Right. So single track and then putts, PUTS. So Palisades Ultra Trail Series.
Love it. So perfect. Listeners, if you're interested in running a Palisades Ultra, and that is for all distances, not just for the 100-miler, or should I tell my listeners that they should just run the 100-milers?
Well, we'd love everyone to run the 100-miler, but we know not everyone's able or capable or wants to. Some people are happy with half marathons, so that code will apply to any distance.
Perfect. So if you're out for an adventure, take the whole family out to a faraway land and run an incredible trail race, and get a coupon code and to get a discount on this incredible race. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your personal stories and sharing this incredible race. Thanks for putting this race on and letting people experience your backyard. It's fantastic how this community is growing, and I think that's the other interesting part about running. Running is so intoxicating on one side, but you just can't run all the time. There are only that many miles that you should be running in order to stay healthy. Not everyone is Killian. And so you have to do a whole bunch of other stuff during the time, right? Sometimes you're not in the middle of a big training block, and so then to volunteer at aid stations, do trail work, build races, or just I don't know, do a podcast, Doug. Right? That's what we do.
Hey, I ran a race last year. Come on.
That's right, you did. I didn't.
Well, no, we appreciate you guys and having us on here, and appreciate what you do. And we know these podcasts definitely are not easy to do. So it seems easy, but once you get behind a mic, it's a different story.
We have talked almost more about food at this point than running. So yeah, it's definitely fun week to week. I do want to thank you guys. As somebody who knows the area, that you guys are putting on such a great race for a good cause down there. If anybody in this area is looking at this race, reach out to me. I will even maybe arrange a carpool down from my place if you want. We'll do a Yellowstone and Teton Day too. So I think you guys have sold this race very well to me. In fact, I'm debating whether or not it's going to be the 50K or the 50 miler, and I probably shouldn't admit that to Matthias, but yeah.
Well, we will say one word though. That 50 miler has Paradise Loop.
Exactly.
The 50 miler and the 100 miler get Paradise Loop, and yeah, you don't want to miss that. So you better do the 50 miler.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I looked at the pictures online, and I'm like, oh man, like that's absolutely gorgeous. Like if you're looking for the quintessential experience, I feel like this is a good race to grab a lot of those very narrow, overgrown single track mountain view runs. So like thank you guys sincerely for putting this on and giving me another race to lust over after.
Very cool. Yes. Thanks everyone. Thanks listeners. Both my listeners and Doug listeners. For joining
all four of you.
All four of us, exactly. Jeff Fullmer and Jeremy Smith, race directors of the Palisades Ultra Trail Race. Thank you so much for being on the show. And as we always say, we are really looking forward to next week, right, Doug?
Next week will be just as amazing as this week. We have nothing planned.
All right. Thank you, guys. We are cutting the recording now. Boom, we're done here.